a bitter man before me.
Oh, how I've waited to say these two words to you, old friend. Shut up.
Welcome to Super Media Runners, where we run the media to you. Let's get down to business and talk about X-Men 97 the only way we know how, ranking all the episodes into a tier list. Let's go. Starting with episode 1, To Me, My X-Men. This is one heck of a start that has us introduced to Sunspot and pretty much summarizing where the X-Men have left off, along with where the world has left off. Presentation was everything, and the action-heavy episode wanted to make sure we'd keep coming back. Definitely an A-tier episode, only because this is just the start and the beginning of a narrative that becomes more complex and interesting throughout the season. Episode 2, Mutant Liberation Begins, is somehow able to masterfully weave in the A-plot and B-plot that culminates in Magneto attempting to follow Xavier's dream while also flexing his magnetic muscles. I was never interested in the Cyclops and Jean relationship. It tends to drag and flip around like in the comics and the cartoon, but the hospital situation where a doctor refuses to help her are just one of the examples where I felt this silly superhero cartoon show based on silly comic books is showing off the parallels to our real world in a significant and interesting way. Magneto's final speech and most of his monologue in every episode was a great way to put everything we were learning about the upcoming plot, Storm losing his powers, into the spotlight. A tier. Episode 3, Fire Made Flesh, is fun. I think the whole clone thing is really confusing if you know nothing about the comic storyline they're adapting from, but I think for the most part, it makes sense, and I'm glad that they follow their character arc with Jean for the rest of the season. The X-Men fighting weird demons was pretty cool, but aside from the soap opera trope of someone being a clone the whole time, nothing really stuck with me on this episode at that critical emotional level that the rest of these episodes end up doing. B tier. Episode 4, Motendo, Life Before Death Part 1 is the only episode to have two storylines that are separate from each other but relatable in themes. Motendo pretty much forced Jubilee to grow up, which is cool, and the video game visuals and concept made me happy, but the pacing was so quick due to sharing screen time with the Storm part of the episode, almost made me wonder if this was originally planned to be 2 episodes. They served their purpose for the rest of the season, but man, Life Before Death Part 1 should have had its own episode to give like a less rushy relationship development between Storm and Forge. C tier. Episode 5, Remember It, is the best episode that takes its time to set the setting of Genosha, only to pull that curtain and throw us in a loop of chaos and destruction that steers the rest of the story into motion. No time was wasted and certainly created stakes that people will be talking about more as, seasons release. S tier. Episode 6, Life, Death, Part 2 had so much to accomplish with such little time and none of it feels wasted. Xavier's adventure in space complemented well with Storm's turmoil and fear that culminates in highlighting why Storm is an inspiring X-Men character that deserves her own solo film in the future. S tier. Episode 7, Bright Eyes, is what I would call the Part 2 for Remember It, and handles all of the biggest reveals that is essentially leads to the next 3 episodes of the master plan. I never feel bored, and I think establishing everyone's sort of endgame role was done masterfully. Hell, even Sunspot and Jubilee's story ends up developing from all of this, which is good. Plus, finally getting a good look at the true villain was pretty dope. A-tier stuff because what this leads to is pretty gold all around. Episode 8, Tolerance is Extinction Part 1 is a great start to a conclusion, and the end fights alone make this a must-watch, especially when it comes to fully developing Bastion that becomes detrimental to the next 2 episodes, and I really didn't have too many complaints considering that this is a Part 1 of 3-part episode ending. S tier for sure. Episode 9, Tolerance is Extinction Part 2 is a great bridge to the juicier bits and pieces of Part 3, and I can say without a doubt that Xavier feels like he had the least amount of agency in terms of apologizing for pretty much not being there when he was needed the most, and yet I still want to take his side because despite his dream coming crashing down and his X-Men lost, I feel like had this been a 4-parter, we could have ruminated more into that impact for the whole team, but then we just pretty much dedicate the rest of the runtime with the team separating into 2 groups to stop Bastion's master plan, which was still pretty solid to see, but I think the bombastic start really had a better sense of pacing when it came to character development as opposed to this one. Still a must-watch, A tier. Episode 10, Tolerance is Extinction, Part 3, is mixed for me. The things that I love about this show shine brightly in this episode, but the things that I really hate really drag this conclusion down for me. The things that I loved were Bastion, the themes of family and teamwork finally coming together, and pretty much every character being involved in significant ways for their characters. Morph, Magneto, Xavier, Nightcrawler. Now for the bad. Phoenix Force plot device felt cheap, even if it resonated emotionally for Jean Grey. The stakes felt less impactful since everyone is pretty much trapped in a certain point of time at the end. I think the idea of everyone trying to help Bastion was great, but the way it all just comes about in the last 5 minutes makes me feel like the runtime could have expanded in favor of fleshing that out better, especially since Bastion is pretty interesting in his own right. I'm excited for more X-Men, but this ending left me unable to fully appreciate, because I know that there's more to this entire story in a future season. So I want that conclusion, but I can't. It makes it hard to judge or even rewatch without the context in mind, for later seasons. So I just want to B tier. I think parts 1 and 2 just had more fun for the journey, and this ending was just what they needed, I guess. And when the whole thing comes together, maybe this will be different, but yeah, B tier. But yeah, looking at this, X-Men 97 was so much with so little time, and I think everything that we wanted from X-Men in the MCU and in their storytelling should definitely be examined by the higher-ups. I just can't wait for more X-Men 97. But let us know what you thought of this first season of X-Men 97 and what expectations you have for their future. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos from Super Meter Runners. Thanks.